The second deal is one of the most powerful moves in all of sleight of hand. It can be used to force, control, retain, switch and swindle, among so many other things. 4 years ago, right here on this channel, I taught the second deal. And it's fair to say that a lot has changed in that time. I mean, I've had 4 years to perfect and master this move, and it is genuinely one of my favorites. And so I feel bad that the tutorials I've done on this I don't consider to be very good. I'm coming back, I'm remaking it, and I'm giving you everything you need, a complete package, a complete recipe with all the ingredients to perform a perfect second deal. Everything from the sleight of hand to the body language, and even how you should move your eyes. Because yes, everything right down to the tiny details matter when it comes to performing sleight of hand, especially with a move where it's really daring, it's really out in the open, the spectators are looking directly at it as you're doing it. You need to convince your audience that this is just an ordinary deal. And so today, I'm going to teach you everything you need to learn the second deal. So those are the CVN strikers. I'm going to be using the white edition, the workers edition in this video. If you like the look of those playing cards, again, the pre-order is down in the description, cvn.cards. Without me blabbing on any longer, let's actually dive into the second deal. And I think probably the best way to start this tutorial is just with a demonstration. One by one, you deal playing cards just like this. Of course, what I'm doing there, if you are completely new to the second deal and you don't know what is different about this, hopefully it should be fairly obvious, you're dealing the second card. So in this case, the 10 of hearts, I'll turn it face up, is being retained on top of the deck as I do the move. So you'll notice I'm dealing cards right here, and the 10 of hearts is remaining on top of the deck throughout that entire process. Now, my second deal looks and feels a little bit different than it did 4 years ago, and that's because of a lot of things. I've changed as a person in 4 years, and my sleight of hand has changed, and even my style of magic has changed. All of those things are connected. The way I perform, my presentation, the style in which I perform, all of that affects how I do sleight of hand, and it will affect how you do sleight of hand. So before I even talk about the mechanics of exactly what is going on here, it is so important to know. I can almost feel in the comment section people are going to be typing, well, when I deal cards, I do this. Or people don't deal cards like that, they deal cards like this. And guess what? Revelation time. People deal cards differently. The way you deal cards will be different to the way I deal cards, and the way that mainstream Mike deals cards, and the way that Larry next door deals cards. They all deal cards in a different way. So before I even talk about a second deal, pick up a pack of cards and deal cards how you would normally deal cards. Because guess what? It should look exactly the same as when you're doing a second deal. There should be absolutely no discrepancy between a second deal and a first deal. And if you think that there is a discrepancy, well, I've been alternating this whole time. I was alternating between first and second deals, and there should be no difference. If you're having to change your grip, if you're having to hold the cards in a different way, you're telling your audience something different is happening. I'm having to hold the cards different, or I'm having to move my hand different, or look different, or behave different. Therefore, the trick is now happening. The sleight of hand is now happening. And this mistake doesn't just apply to the second deal, it's just worth saying. This mistake applies to so many other moves. Basically every other sleight of hand move. I can't really think of a sleight of hand move where that doesn't apply. The reason I'm kind of zoomed out this far, the reason we're starting this far away for a sleight of hand tutorial, I don't want to dive into the close-up too soon, because that is not what it's about. You can master the sleight of hand all you want, but if your body language is incorrect, Doesn't matter. Sleight of hand can be as good as you want. You're telling your audience that it's happening. So there's no point it being good, you know? When I deal cards, no matter what I'm doing, I hold them in my left hand and I deal with my right. So that's what I'm gonna do. And I'm just gonna take a second to sort of readjust and make this comfortable. Just to get into a standard mechanics grip. Index finger on the top, thumb at the side, rest of the fingers on the other side. This is just what feels comfortable. And obviously my thumb needs to be able to move around and do a little thumb war because that is what's going to thumb the cards away in order for me to do the dealing. Now, when you're doing the dealing, again, I've already gone over the fact that you need to act natural and need to act exactly the same as you would when you're dealing cards normally. But it's more than that. You actually need to look, not at the deck, but at the cards you're dealing. You need to almost follow the cards as you're dealing them. Because that way, that is exactly what you would do. When you're dealing cards, you don't look at the deck because why would you do that? Why would you look at where the cards are leaving? You'd look at where the cards are going to. So if my eyes are pointing here, again, red flags for the audience, they're gonna sense that something's up. They're gonna sense that the funny business is happening. So you look at the cards that are being dealt. You can even follow them one by one with your eyes as they're going from here to here, and I think that really, really sells it. Again, it's not something your audience are going to be consciously aware of, but it is something your audience are going to be aware of unconsciously. And I think with that, we've covered pretty much all of the external stuff. You know, things like how you stand, things like how you talk and how you behave, all of that is so personal, I can't teach you that. I mean, I could stand here and explain every little thing that I'm doing, but it'll be different for you, so there's no point in me doing that. We're going to dive right into the close-up angle and teach you more about the actual sleight of hand. And just to switch things up a little bit, I'm going to be using a different striker's deck for this close-up. This is the original striker's deck, so let's get rid of the cut card and the joker. In fact, we'll use the cut card because this does something quite nice, which you might find helpful when you're practicing the second deal. If I were to use just these cards are borderless, and so it's kind of difficult to see where one card ends and another begins, like where the edge of the card is, if they're completely borderless. So if you do have bordered playing cards, that's good for practicing, or you can use a cut card like this, which is essentially just a contrasting card. They use this in casinos to put on the bottom of the deck to hide cards or tell the dealer when to cut and shuffle and so on. So it feels fitting for a gambling style trick to use a gambler's sort of tool, I guess, or at least a utility card. So the second deal, I've already said you should hold the cards how it feels natural for you to hold the cards. That will vary, so if yours looks different to this, that is again completely fine, so long as it's consistent. That's the word. Consistency is the word of the day. Write it down. Don't write it down, there's not a word of the day, it's fine. So what we're going to do is push the card off with my thumb. Now, the card comes off at an angle, just like this. And this angle opens up what is known as the brief. So when I push the card, as I would when I'm dealing, this is identical to when I'm dealing cards. So if I take this away for a second, when I'm dealing a card, I push with my thumb, I take this card, and this is what we're left with. So we start in this position, no cards are going anywhere. Then position B is this, one card is protruding, and position C, once I've dealt the card, we're back to this. So the second deal needs to replicate those positions. We start in position A, we go to B, we take the card, we've second dealt this time, but we're still in the same position, position C right here, where no cards are going everywhere. Some people, when they're doing the second deal, they obsess about having the brief as small as possible. Like if your brief is 1 millimeter, if you're able to take a card from, you know, a tiny, tiny brief that is in some way impressive. It is not at all impressive, it is completely impractical, but also it's completely unrealistic as to how you deal cards. If you're getting your brief as small as possible, then, well, I damn well hope that is how you normally deal cards, because if it's not, it's a pointless exercise. The way that people deal cards is they push one off and they take it. So if you're not replicating that with your second deal, foolish behavior, I've got to say it. So we are going to go through the entire move from start to finish. Again, my thumb can move freely. I push just like this, and essentially this card is not going straight over, it's not going completely over the deck, because then it covers these fingers. For me, my middle finger ends up at the side of the deck. Again, sometimes it's here, most of the time it's here. So when I push the card at an angle, my middle finger is still visible, just like this. It is still visible. my thumb comes across and it's going to, instead of grabbing here, the only difference between a first deal and a second deal is instead of grabbing here, I'm going to grab here and take the card from here. As soon as that's done, this is not position C, there is still a card overhanging, so we need to replicate the idea that this card has been taken, and so it squares up on the deck. That is sort of a distant general view of the second deal. I'm now going to dive in again a little bit closer just to show you the ins and outs of the mechanics. Then we'll return to this angle for the actual like rhythm and the way that everything comes together, because that is where the second deal is formed. So this is as close to a POV shot as I can feasibly get while still teaching it, as if you're looking over my shoulder. So we've got our cut card on top right here, and just like I said, we push the card off at an angle. In my case, it covers the ring finger and the pinky finger just like this, and it leaves our middle finger exposed, just the tip of the middle finger. And we've got this nice big brief, which is accidentally created. We're not aiming to get a big brief, but it is just inevitably created from the fact that we're pushing this card off to apparently deal it. And that is the motion that we're replicating. Once again, instead of grabbing here, I grab here, and my thumb is going to contact on this area. The pad of my thumb is going to contact on this area and pull, and as that happens, the card squares up. So it's not two separate motions. I like to think of this as one sort of solid motion that happens all at once. Even though it's with two hands, it's one motion. Each card is a beat, each card is a moment. It's not like I'm taking this and then it's lining up. Then you're getting into all sorts of trouble because you're separating those two moments and they should feel like one. The bigger thing is hiding the smaller thing. In this case, the bigger thing is this card being dealt. That is what the audience care about. That is the center of the trick. That is the thing they should focus on. And that is being dealt to the table. What happens to the deck is really kind of irrelevant because they're not worried about the deck, and neither should you. Again, that's why you're not looking at it. You're looking at where the cards are being dealt. But yeah, it's one motion. So I push like this. I'm grabbing with the pad of my thumb, I'm applying some pressure, medium pressure, just as much as I would if I was, thumbing away a card from the deck. I apply that pressure and it sort of goes on top of that middle finger. And as I'm grabbing this card comes and squares away. So with this hand, I'm dislodging this card and it's coming back, almost like hinging from this point, but don't think of that too much. You shouldn't sort of consciously be focusing on this point, but it is almost like a hinge. But what you should really be focusing on is this card aligning with these fingers on the side of the deck, because that is what's going to happen. It's more important that the card lines up here than here, is what I'm trying to say. So maybe the hinge metaphor isn't helping, but that's the motion right there. Super, super simple. You'll also notice that as I'm doing that, I'm tilting ever so slightly. You'll notice when I deal cards normally, I'm doing the tilt anyway. I'm not doing the tilt purposefully to hide the second deal, although you'll see from another angle in just a minute how this does hide the second deal and make it so much more convincing. But I'm not doing it purposefully to hide the second deal, because when I'm doing fair deals, I do the exact same tilt move. It just helps add almost like inertia, almost like momentum as you pass this card from one hand to another. That tilt just kind of eases along the process of, oh yes, this card is going from here to here. And that tilt, even though I'm slightly exaggerating it now just for sort of emphasis, it really does help that general motion. If I were to not do that, which I actually find kind of difficult, I really have to think about not doing it. It almost, I don't know, that looks weird. Like, that looks more fishy. Me doing normal first deals without tilting the deck, that looks more fishy than me doing second deals with the tilt. The tilt just makes it all so much more natural. Again, you'll see from another angle in just a second how the tilt actually benefits the second deal. One of the reasons I find the second deal so hard to teach, and one of the reasons that it's taken me multiple attempts to teach this move, is that it's not just one move. Like a lot of these false deals, and like a lot of moves in sleight of hand in general, it's multiple things happening at once. You've not only got the tilt I just mentioned, you've not only got the hinge or the coming together, the squaring up of this card that is supposedly being dealt, you've also got the deal itself, and then you've got, all of the other baggage that comes along with it, all of the sort of psychological baggage that comes along with the second deal. And that can create tension. If you're thinking about all of these things at once, it can very easily create tension. It can create a very stiff very sharp second deal. You're sort of death gripping the deck, and that is something that I was very guilty of in the past. So I like to make this move as natural and relaxed as possible. I like to really sort of take my time with it. If I need to pause here on the deck, I can. I don't sort of find that too weird or too suspicious at all. And you will notice occasionally, I've done it a couple of times, it's not a major error if I miss a card, if I can't quite thumb it away, if I just struggle to do it. But guess what? I do that when I'm dealing cards anyway. If I were to first deal cards, occasionally I'm going to miss one, I'm not going to grab it, and that's just natural. If those sort of mistakes happen when you're dealing firsts, then those sort of mistakes should happen when you're dealing seconds. It's all well and good me talking about this, but there's one thing that is really, really crucial that I'm missing, and that is the rhythm. And of course, because I'm a completionist, I've used the white deck, I've used the green deck, so it's only fair that I use the black deck. These are the intergalactic strikers. Teaching the strike second deal with the strikers, it's just too perfect. Let's crack these open and talk about rhythm. Nothing like cracking open a fresh deck. Oh, look at these. Love the way these spread. The rhythm of the second deal, again, just like everything else about your presentation and about your almost personality, comes into it ever so slightly. You know, if you're an energetic, bubbly performer and you perform at 100 miles an hour, then maybe second dealing at 100 miles an hour suits you, and that is something that you want to do. But if you're more laid back, again, you can take your time, you can almost show your audience. I dare say you almost show your audience, this is the card I'm dealing, and then you deal it. Now that in itself is a technique. If you're just dealing one card, I wouldn't recommend doing it really, really quickly. Because it's just one card, your audience are going to want to care about that card a little bit more. If you're doing a single card switch where, you know, let's say we've got the ace of spades on top, you ask your spectator to hold out their hand, I would be tempted to pause at this moment right here and show them one card is misaligned, like that's the one you're going to deal. Now obviously you don't verbally draw attention to it. Hey look, I'm going to push off this card. Don't do that. But you show them non-verbally, just for a second, this is the card, and then you give it straight to them and it goes straight into their hand. And that's a nice moment because there's almost a beat to it. There's almost a rhythm to it. It's like, here's the card, take it into your hand. There's a nice little sort of, I don't know, there's a pattern to that which is very pleasing on the spectator's brains. It makes sense. They see it here, they feel you take it, they feel it in their hand. It's a very sort of chunky way of doing a second deal. You break it into its constituent parts, but still the act of taking the card and having this line up is still one thing. So you're combining those two moments, and in the spectator's mind, it's like, well, that was just one thing happening. That was just him taking the card. Psychologically, that makes sense. I think it's like, oh yeah, it goes from here to here. It's almost like a false pass in a way. Like you're taking a coin from one hand and putting it into another. It almost feels like that when you're just doing it once, because they see it, it's here, but then it's not there. Does that make sense? Of course, it's a completely different story. It almost feels like a completely different move, in fact, when you're doing multiple second deals. You can slow it down, you can show them. And again, it's not a very angle sensitive move. Like I can do it at this angle and I'm not worried about them seeing the brief and seeing the fact I'm not taking the right card. Especially with borderless cards like this, it's actually very difficult. Like I said before, it's very difficult to see where one card ends and another begins. So if you're doing it at this angle, which yes, is the worst angle for the second deal because theoretically they should be able to see exactly what's going on, you're in control of the performance. You get to choose what deck to use. And so while I definitely wouldn't recommend using borderless cards when you're first learning the move, when you're first practicing the second deal, because it will make your life harder, as you get more and more confident with it, and as you can basically do the second deal in your sleep, I would highly, highly recommend using borderless cards when performing in front of audience members, because you get to choose the deck. So why not choose a deck that makes the move more deceptive, that makes it harder for your audience to see that you're not dealing the top card? Just returning to the topic of speed, when it comes to doing it quickly, I do think that doing it super quickly can sort of turn the second deal into a bit of a blur, and it feels like you're hiding something. Because you're doing it fast, because you're rushing through, the audience might question what you're trying to hide. Why are you rushing through? You're just dealing cards. Deal them like a normal person, right? You can deal them at a semi-medium speed, I'd say this is probably top speed, but if you're getting, you know, any faster than that, it's just too much for the audience to follow. So yes, while I have just said that it should be hard for your audience to tell that you're dealing the second card, kind of as well as that, it should be easy for your audience to interpret that you're supposed to be dealing the first card. Now, let's talk about the tilt, because this is the perfect angle to discuss the tilt. As I was saying before, the tilt is natural, and it's what you do when you add a little bit of inertia, a little bit of momentum to take this card right here and deal it just like this. So as if you're dealing this card, you push it over, and then you're dealing it down here. Obviously, you wouldn't do it with the card face up. That is for instructional purposes. But look what happens because of the tilt from the audience's perspective, which is where you would be standing. You hide the second deal happening. So that taking of the card from the brief is completely hidden from the audience. Again, I made a little mistake there, didn't quite grab the card. That's fine, I'm leaving it in, that's normal, and that is supposed to happen. But look, you can see the full jack. I show them that it's being moved across, or sometimes it happens together, but you can show them that it's being moved across. And then as I'm about to take that card, the deck tilts away, and now you can't see it. It's been completely obscured. And when we return, the tilt goes backwards and we show the audience the cards, everything has already been done. The move has already been done. The actual second deal takes hardly any time, and the time that it fits into is just as the deck is tilting away. This is the beauty of the second deal. From that perfect angle, from that sweet spot, which of course is exactly where the camera is, with the card face down to obviously sell and complete the illusion, you just can't tell what's happening. Even as I'm looking into the screen right now, you just can't see it because it's been completely obscured by the tilt. Now, yes, they can see the card move over. As I just said, I think that's a good thing because I think it sells the illusion this is the card that's being taken, but then the actual taking happens as the deck is being completely tilted away. I'm running out of cards, so let's square these up. Another piece of advice I'll throw into the mix just quickly is make sure to practice with a full deck as often as you can, because what you might find if you're just continually doing second deals is the majority of your practice will take place with not a full deck, which means that when you'll be rustiest is with a full deck. So yeah, just be careful to make sure to, you know, put the cards back every so often and practice those first few, because you do not want those first few second deals to be the rustiest. Those have to be the cleanest. Those are the ones that the spectators are going to be burning you on, if any, is those first few cards. So yeah, practice with a full deck as often as possible. So I've covered a lot here. I've covered a lot in this video. It's almost turned into a sort of mini masterclass, but I think it kind of deserves it. And this is a move that you kind of have to discover. I could sit here and tell you the ins and outs of every detail of how I do the second deal, but as I've said multiple times in this video, it's a personal journey. So I think I've given you the ingredients, I think I've given you the recipe, but now it's kind of up to you to go out there, play around with it, perform it, practice it to death, and just kind of discover your second deal. If you enjoyed this video, then this is the style of video that members of the Magician Club will be very familiar with, which is where I teach one concept in greater detail and often with fewer edits to leave in some of the really crucial advice. And if you're interested in joining the Magician Club, it starts at just $5 a month. Actually less than that, because you can get 15% off if you join on an annual membership. And for $5, literally just $5, you don't just get one trick or two tricks to get you started, you get access to a constantly growing library of magic tutorials and masterclasses, including my 1 hour, 44-minute marked deck masterclass that is on there for the $5 tier, and that is just one of a ton of items that you can get, including my hands-free any card, any number, how to make an index, a 40-out index using a single sheet of paper. I mean, I'm just rattling them off. Those are just a few of the items that are in the $5 tier. And if you want access to the full archive, more than 100 items, that's only $15. Thought it was worth mentioning because this kind of ended up feeling like a Magician Club video, so yeah, if you enjoyed this, definitely worth checking out. themagician.club, link is in the description, but if you want to get these 3 decks of cards, they are currently on pre-order on cvn.cards, and I did promise I would show you that 4th and final deck in this video, and it's already been released on Instagram, but this is the Private Reserve Edition. It is absolutely mad when you spread these cards out. Oh my goodness. It is just the most eye-catching deck I think we've ever produced. This deck will only be available on pre-order. It will not be sold anywhere else. It will certainly never be reprinted. So if you like the look of this, again, it's on cvn.cards. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the thumbs up button down below as well and subscribe to the channel if you're new. Really does help me out. And I've sort of got this aim to get 22,000 subscribers before I turn 23, because I'm 22 right now. I think it would be kind of cool to have 22,000 subscribers while I'm 22, so we're kind of, fingers crossed, we'll do it. We're almost there, so yeah, hopefully that can happen. Make sure to subscribe to help me with that completely pointless mission, and I will see you in the next video. Until then, take care.